A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
I was looking at a headline the other day about systemic fatigue, this idea that the world is so fundamentally broken that the only logical response is to just sort of opt out and scroll until the lights go out. It is a heavy way to live, especially here in 2026, where it feels like we are constantly patching holes in a ship that was never quite seaworthy to begin with. But then I started thinking about the concept Daniel sent over in his prompt today. Daniel wants us to dig into Tikkun Olam, which most people translate as repairing the world, but it is way more interesting than just a slogan for a charity drive or a corporate volunteer day.
It is one of those concepts that has undergone a massive, almost unrecognizable transformation over the centuries. I am Herman Poppleberry, by the way, and I have been diving deep into the Lurianic roots of this because what we call Tikkun Olam today would be a complete mystery to a mystic living in Safed in the 16th century. It is a paradox, really. You have this ancient, deeply mystical, almost cosmic theory of brokenness that has somehow become the primary ethical engine for modern secular social justice and professional agency. It is the bridge between the celestial and the cubicle.
It is a massive leap from 16th century mysticism to modern tech ethics or environmental policy. Usually, when things go that mainstream, they lose their edge. They become these soft, fuzzy platitudes that you see on inspirational posters in a human resources office. But Tikkun Olam seems to have kept its teeth. It offers a very specific, non-nihilistic framework for individual impact that feels weirdly perfect for the challenges we are facing right now. It is not about saving the world in one go. It is about the mechanics of repair.
The reason it keeps its teeth is because the foundational myth is so gritty and, frankly, a bit dark. To understand where this comes from, we have to talk about Isaac Luria, the great Kabbalist of Safed. He introduced this idea called Shavirat HaKalim, or the shattering of the vessels. The story goes that during the process of creation, the divine light was so intense, so infinite, that the material vessels meant to hold it simply could not contain the pressure. The vessels shattered, and these shards of divinity, these holy sparks, fell into the material world and got trapped in the husks of physical matter, what the Kabbalists call the kelipot.
So, in this view, the world is not just broken by accident or because of human failure or some original sin. You are saying the world is inherently, structurally flawed from the very moment of creation. It was born broken.
The brokenness is a feature, not a bug. In Lurianic thought, this shattering was actually a necessary catastrophe because it created the space for human agency and free will. If the world were perfect and the divine light were perfectly contained, there would be no room for us to do anything. We would just be spectators in a perfect museum. The work of tikkun, or repair, is the process of finding those trapped sparks in everyday life and elevating them through intentional action. It turns every human being into a cosmic technician.
It is a wild metaphor for intentionality. You are saying that every time we act with purpose, or fix a broken system, or treat someone with dignity, we are effectively gathering these cosmic shards and putting the puzzle back together. But I noticed you mentioned that the term actually appears much earlier than the 16th century. It is in the Mishnah, right? But the context there feels very different from this mystical light and shards business.
You have a great eye for the legal history. In the Mishnah, specifically in Gittin 4.2, Tikkun Olam shows up in a strictly legal and social context. The phrase used is Mipnai Tikkun HaOlam, which means for the sake of the order of the world. It was about social stability and the public good. For example, the rabbis would make certain rulings about divorce settlements or the redemption of captives, not because the letter of the law strictly demanded it, but for the sake of Tikkun Olam. They wanted to prevent a total breakdown of the social fabric. It was about keeping the gears of society grinding along without too much friction. It was social maintenance, plain and simple.
So it started as social maintenance in the ancient world. Then it became this high-concept cosmic mysticism with Luria in the 1600s, and now, in the 21st century, it has circled back to social action. That is a lot of weight for one phrase to carry. I'm curious about that middle transition, especially how it landed in the United States and Israel. How did a theory about divine sparks become the rallying cry for progressive activism and secular NGOs?
That shift is largely a post-World War II phenomenon. In the 1950s and 60s, Jewish thinkers and communal leaders began to secularize the term. They were looking for a way to express Jewish values in a pluralistic, modern society. They took the Lurianic idea of human responsibility and applied it to the civil rights movement, to the fight against poverty, and later to environmentalism. They moved the focus from the celestial realms down to the streets. The gathering of sparks stopped being about esoteric prayer and ritual and started being about legislation, protest, and community organizing.
I can see why that resonated so deeply. If you are living in a post-Holocaust world, a world that has seen the absolute depth of human depravity and destruction, the idea that repair is a mandatory human task is a very powerful antidote to despair. It gives you a job to do when the world feels like a graveyard. But I wonder if we lose something when we strip away the mysticism entirely. If Tikkun Olam just becomes a synonym for social justice or general kindness, does it lose that specific flavor of repair?
There is a real tension there, and you are hitting on a major critique within the Jewish community. Some critics argue that by turning it into a catch-all for any good deed, we have diluted the original meaning until it is almost transparent. But I think the power lies in the distinction between repair and perfection. This is something I think about a lot when we talk about tech or business. Utopianism is dangerous because it assumes there is a final state where everything is fixed and we can all stop working. Tikkun Olam is much more humble and, I think, more realistic. It assumes the world is broken and will stay broken, but that the act of incremental maintenance is the highest human calling.
That feels very grounded. It reminds me of what we discussed back in episode 991 when we looked at the evolution of the Israeli kibbutz. They started with this utopian, communal vision of a perfect society, but they had to pivot to high-tech and global business to survive. They moved from trying to build a perfect, isolated world to trying to be an engine of repair in the global market. They realized that you can often do more tangible good by building a desalination plant or a cybersecurity firm than by arguing for 3 hours over who washes the communal dishes.
That is the professional integration piece. When you look at the startup nation ethos, you see a lot of this baked into the culture. It is this restless, almost neurotic need to find a problem and fix it. In a modern professional context, Tikkun Olam maps very cleanly onto things like environmental, social, and governance criteria, or ESG. But it goes deeper than just checking boxes on a corporate social responsibility report to please investors. It is about treating your specific field of expertise as a vessel that needs constant recalibration.
Let's talk about tech specifically, because that is where a lot of our listeners spend their time. If you are a developer or a data scientist in 2026, how do you apply a repair framework to something as abstract as an algorithm or a large language model? We talk about algorithmic bias all the time, but usually the conversation is about blame and finger-pointing. How does the Tikkun framework change that posture?
It changes the posture from one of defense to one of active stewardship. If you assume that any system you build is going to be naturally biased or flawed because it is made by flawed humans in a flawed world, then your job is not to build a perfect, bias-free algorithm on the first try. That is impossible. Your job is to be in a constant state of tikkun. You are looking for the broken spots, the places where the data is trapping people in unfair cycles or reinforcing old prejudices, and you are working to release those people. It is code as a vessel. You know the code is going to shatter under the weight of real-world complexity, so you build for repairability and transparency from the start.
I like that. It is like the difference between a glass vase and a kintsugi bowl. In kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold or silver lacquer, the cracks are not hidden, they are highlighted. The repair becomes part of the history and the beauty of the object. It is actually stronger and more valuable because it was broken and then mended. Maybe that is how we should look at our social and technical systems. We should not be hiding the patches or pretending the system is seamless. We should be proud of the repair work.
The danger, though, is what I call performative tikkun. We see this in branding all the time. A company will use the language of repairing the world or saving the planet to mask systemic issues in their supply chain or their labor practices. They use it as a brand shield. If the concept is used to justify the status quo rather than challenge it, then it is not really tikkun. It is just more husks, more physical matter trapping the light. It is a form of spiritual bypassing where you use a holy concept to avoid doing the actual difficult work of structural change.
You have been waiting all week to use the word husks in a sentence, haven't you? But you are right. If the repair is just a coat of paint over a structural crack, it is dishonest. This brings us to the personal side of this. How does someone take this massive cosmic theory and turn it into a daily habit? Because it is so easy to get overwhelmed by the scale of the brokenness. You look at the climate, you look at political polarization, you look at the economy, and you feel like you are trying to put out a forest fire with a water pistol.
That is where we have to look at the micro repair. There is a famous line in the Ethics of the Fathers, or Pirkei Avot, attributed to Rabbi Tarfon. He said, "It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it." That is the perfect summary of the Tikkun Olam mindset. You are not responsible for the whole world, but you are responsible for the specific corner of it where you have agency. It is about the refusal to be paralyzed by the scale of the problem.
So, how do you identify that corner? I am thinking of a spark audit. If we assume that our specific skills, whether it is coding, or writing, or management, or even just being a good neighbor, are the tools for gathering sparks, how do we know where to point them? How do we avoid just spinning our wheels?
A spark audit is a great way to frame it. You look at where your unique talents intersect with the systemic need. It is not just about what you are good at, but where the world is particularly broken in a way that you understand. If you are a great communicator, maybe your tikkun is addressing the ethics of gossip and how we talk about each other in a digital community. We actually went deep on that in episode 1164. The idea that speech itself can be a weapon that breaks the world or a tool that repairs it. If you can fix the way a small group of people communicates, you have performed a significant act of tikkun. You have released sparks that were trapped in a cycle of negativity.
It is about intentionality in the mundane. I think about this in terms of my daily workflow. We all have those broken systems in our lives. The things that just do not work right. The small frictions that we just learn to live with because we are too busy. Applying Tikkun Olam means stopping and saying, I'm going to fix this, not just for my own convenience, but because leaving things broken is a form of negligence. It is about taking ownership of the environment around you. It is the opposite of the tragedy of the commons. It is the triumph of the individual repairman.
And that ownership is actually what prevents burnout. Nihilism and burnout come from the feeling that nothing you do matters because the system is too big and too broken. But if your goal is just to gather one spark today, to make one small repair that lasts, that is achievable. It gives you a sense of momentum. You are not trying to boil the ocean, you are just fixing one leaky faucet. And over time, those small repairs aggregate. They create a culture of maintenance rather than a culture of consumption and disposal.
I want to push back a little on the secularized version of this. If we take the divinity out of the sparks, if we just say they are human potential or social goods, does the motivation hold up over the long term? Because the mystical version says that by doing this work, you are literally affecting the divine realm. You are part of a cosmic drama. The secular version is just being a good person or a responsible citizen. Is that enough to sustain people through the really hard stuff? The stuff that doesn't give you a quick win?
That is the million-dollar question. For many people, the secular social justice framework is enough because they see the immediate human impact. They see the person who was hungry and is now fed. But I think the mystical roots provide a sturdier floor. When you believe that the world is fundamentally designed to be repaired by you, it changes your identity. You are not just a worker or a citizen or a consumer. You are a partner in creation. That is a much higher calling. It gives a sense of sacredness to even the most boring, repetitive tasks. It suggests that the universe itself is waiting for your specific contribution.
It turns maintenance into a ritual. I think about people who work in waste management or infrastructure or even software maintenance and legacy code. These are often seen as low-status jobs because they are not about creating something shiny and new. They are about keeping things from falling apart. But in the Tikkun framework, these people are the front lines. They are the ones actually doing the heavy lifting of holding the world together. They are the ones preventing the vessels from shattering further.
The unsung heroes of entropy. If you think about it, entropy is the natural state of the material world. Everything is constantly moving toward disorder, decay, and chaos. Tikkun Olam is the counterforce to entropy. It is the conscious application of energy and intelligence to maintain order and beauty. Whether that is in a forest, a city, or a database, it is the same fundamental act. It is the human spirit saying no to the darkness.
Let's talk about the second-order effects of this mindset. If you start seeing the world through the lens of repair, does it change how you view other people? Because usually, in our productivity-obsessed culture, we view people who are struggling, or people who are broken as problems to be solved, or liabilities to be managed. But if they are vessels containing trapped sparks, that is a very different perspective.
It shifts the focus from pity to respect. You are not helping someone because you are superior to them or because you feel sorry for them. You are helping them because they have a divine spark that is currently obscured by their circumstances, and your job is to help them release it. It is about uncovering the value that is already there, rather than bestowing value from the outside. That is a much more dignified way to engage with social issues. It acknowledges the inherent worth of the individual, regardless of their current state of repair.
It also applies to how we view ourselves, which I think is a huge part of the mental health crisis we are seeing in 2026. We are all broken vessels too. We have our own shards and our own husks. Applying Tikkun Olam internally means recognizing that our flaws and our past traumas are not just damage. They are the very things that give us the capacity to grow and to help others. It is that idea from Leonard Cohen that the light gets in through the cracks. If you were perfect, you wouldn't be able to perform Tikkun because you wouldn't understand the nature of the brokenness.
It is a very pro-human philosophy. It rejects the idea that we are just biological accidents or economic units or data points. It says we have a specific, non-negotiable role in the universe. And in an age where we are dealing with the rise of autonomous systems and the feeling that human labor is becoming obsolete, this concept of unique human agency in the work of repair is incredibly vital. An artificial intelligence can optimize a system, it can find efficiencies, but it cannot perform tikkun in the same way because it does not have the same skin in the game. It does not experience the brokenness, so it cannot truly value the repair.
That is an interesting point. An artificial intelligence is a tool, a very powerful vessel, but it is still a vessel that can shatter. We are seeing that with the alignment problem and the way these models can hallucinate or reflect the worst parts of our data. Maybe our job as humans in the age of AI is to be the ones who perform tikkun on the models themselves. We are the ones who have to find the sparks in the machine and make sure they are not buried under layers of bad incentives or toxic training data. We are the ethical mechanics of the digital age.
The work of repair never ends. It just changes shape. We move from repairing physical walls to repairing digital ones, from social contracts to algorithmic ones. We also have to mention the concept of bal tashchit, which is the prohibition against wanton destruction. It is often cited as the Jewish basis for environmentalism. It fits perfectly with Tikkun Olam. If you are focused on repair, you are naturally opposed to the throwaway culture that defines so much of modern life. You value the longevity of things. You see the spark even in a piece of old hardware or a neglected piece of land.
I want to wrap this up with some practical takeaways for the listeners. If someone is listening to this and they feel that weight of the world, that systemic fatigue we talked about at the start, what is the first step in adopting a tikkun mindset? How do they move from doom scrolling to spark gathering?
The first step is the micro repair habit. Find one thing in your immediate environment that is broken. Not a global problem, not something you need a committee to solve, but something small. Maybe it is a strained relationship with a coworker that you have been avoiding, or a messy corner of your office that drains your energy, or a piece of code that you know is inefficient but you have been ignoring. Fix it with the intention that this act is a contribution to the overall order of the world. Do it as a ritual, not just a chore. Feel the weight of that repair.
And the second step is the spark audit. Take 10 minutes this week to look at your professional skills. Ask yourself, where am I uniquely positioned to release some light? Where is my industry or my community struggling with a specific kind of brokenness that I actually have the tools to address? It is about moving from being a passive observer of the world's problems to being an active participant in their repair. It is about finding your specific corner of the puzzle.
And finally, embrace the imperfection. Stop waiting for the perfect time or the perfect solution. The vessels have already shattered. The world is already messy. Your job is not to be perfect, your job is to be useful. Pick up a shard and start walking. You do not have to finish the work, but you cannot walk away from it. There is a deep peace that comes from accepting that the world is broken and that you are the one who is supposed to be fixing it.
That is a great place to leave it. The world is broken, and that is exactly why we are here. It is a heavy responsibility, but it is also a huge privilege. It turns life into a scavenger hunt for divinity. It means that no matter how dark things get, there is always a spark to be found and a repair to be made.
It really does. It makes the world a much more interesting place to wake up in every morning. It gives you a reason to keep looking, even when the headlines are grim.
This has been a deep one. Thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes and performing his own version of Tikkun on our audio files every week. And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this show and allow us to dive into these complex topics.
If you found this discussion helpful, or if it gave you a new perspective on your own work, we would love it if you could leave a quick review on your podcast app. It really helps other people find the show and join the conversation. We read every single one of them.
This has been My Weird Prompts. We are on Telegram if you want to get notified when new episodes drop. Just search for My Weird Prompts there. We have a great community growing there, sharing their own Spark audits and repair stories.
We'll be back soon with another prompt from Daniel. Until then, go find some sparks.
See ya.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts.